This anime series begins by showing a teenage boy named Yuki Amano, commonly called Yuki, who is a middle school student. Yuki is a 14-year-old, shy, daydreaming loner who observes life and jots down the events on his cell phone. Because he has no friends and is always aloof, Yuki often talks to his imaginary friend, Deus Ex Machina, the god of space and time, and his assistant, More. Knowing that Yuki always writes everything on his cell phone, Deus tells him that he will turn his cell phone into a diary that can predict the future. Yuki, who heard this, just laughed a little, thinking Deus was joking because someone couldn't predict the future. Yuki chooses to ignore Deus' words because he thinks Deus is just an ordinary imaginary friend. The next morning, Yuki finds his diary entry for the day filled in, where it says that a murder will occur in the city of Sakurami, and news about the murder will be broadcast on television. He meant to ignore that. But then, a television station reported the death of a woman in the city of Sakurami who was suspected of being a murder victim. Yuki was very surprised because his phone diary could predict the future, according to what Deus Ex Machina said. Not only that, various events that were written in his phone diary became a reality, one of which was about the mathematics test which was held suddenly and the answer key. When he was about to go home, Yuki, knowing that he would be bullied by his classmates behind the school building, took another route to avoid them and finally managed to survive the bullying. He becomes very happy because he has a cell phone that can predict the future, making it easier for him to live his life. At least, that's what he thinks. One day, when Yuki is working on a test with a smiling face, he accidentally meets one of her classmates, a girl named Yuno Gasai, who looks at her intently as if she knows something. He tried to ignore her, but when he was about to go home, he saw a doll on the chair she had been sitting on. Yuki was surprised because the doll looked exactly like More, indicating that the girl knew about More and Deus Ex Machina. It didn't stop there. He was even more shocked when a new entry was written in his phone diary mentioning dead end, which indicates that the cell phone's owner will soon die. Yuki is then surprised by the appearance of Yuno, whose expression is quite scary, as if she wants to kill him. Because he got the dead end entry on his cell phone, Yuki thought she would kill him, so he rushed to run away. However, she catches him, who enters the elevator and reveals to Yuki that she also has a cell phone that can predict the future. Yuki is very surprised to find out that Yuno is also the future diary cell phone owner like himself. However, what surprised him even more was that Yuno suddenly kissed him. She did this on purpose to ease his fears and also to clear up any misunderstandings between them. She explains that she has a cell phone that can predict Yuki's future, in contrast to his cell phone, which predicts the owner's future. Yuno has actually loved Yuki for a long time. Before she got the future diary about Yuki from Deus Ex Machina, she always wrote everything about him in her cell phone diary. Furthermore, she explains that the notifications about Yuki's future that she received were much faster than those that came into Yuki's cell phone. Yuno says someone plans to kill Yuki when he reaches the 14th floor. Therefore, she suggests that they go to the roof of the building to fight the person who will kill him. Arriving there, they devised a plan to defeat the person. Not long after, a man arrived on the roof of the building carrying a machete to kill Yuki. The man turns out to be the owner of the future diary, just like Yuki and Yuno. When Yuno helps Yuki by distracting the man, he uses his ability to shoot a dart at the cell phone, causing him to vanish into a vortex. Seeing this, they finally find out that if the future diary's cell phone is lost or damaged, then the owner will die and just disappear. Yuki begins to feel worried about the future diary cell phone that he has and then asks Deus Ex Machina about the real purpose of Deus giving the future diary to himself, Yuno, and the man who wants to kill him. Instead of explaining, Deus invites him to a meeting of the future diary holders, which turns out to be 12 people, including Yuki and Yuno. Deus explained that they would be involved in a survival game in which they all must try to kill each other to win the right to succeed him as the god of time and space. After learning that he managed to kill one of the future diary holders, who turned out to be a serial killer, the remaining future diary holders seemed impressed with him and excited to kill him. Not only that, but because Deus considers Yuki a personal favorite to win the game, Yuki is mainly targeted by other future diary holders. On the other hand, Yuki, the first future diary holder, wants to live a simple and peaceful life. Instead, he feels shocked and frustrated when he finds out that he has been caught in a deadly game, where all the participants are after his life. Since then, Yuki has lived his days filled with fear and anxiety. Moreover, Yuki doesn't know the future diary holders other than Yuno, his classmate. At school, he approached Yuno and said he wanted to talk about something important, but she said gym class had started, so she rushed to the locker room to change clothes. After all his classmates had headed to the locker room, Yuki, who was still in class, was suddenly approached by a girl named Minine Uryu, who turned out to be the 9th future diary holder and planned to kill Yuki. Meanwhile, Yuno, who gets a future notification about him, immediately rushes back to class and arrives just in time before Uryu attacks him. Yuno tries to attack Uryu, but she manages to escape from there. Even so, Uryu didn't stop her intention to kill Yuki. She had even prepared several bombs that she planted all over the school, which she detonated simultaneously, hoping the explosions would kill him. Fortunately, Yuki managed to survive because Yuno always protected him. Knowing that she will always protect him, he plans to take advantage of this to survive the future diary holders who want to kill him. Then, he kisses Yuno to reassure her. Through her future diary, Uryu can find out that Yuki is still alive, so she immediately carries out another plan to kill him. Uryu threatens to kill everyone by destroying the school building if they don't bring Yuki in front of her within the allotted time limit. Hearing this, several students immediately grabbed Yuki and knocked him down before finally bringing him in front of Uryu. Seeing this, Yuno became angry and purposely ran into the corridor to activate the bomb set by Uryu, killing her schoolmates because of the explosion. At the same time, a police captain named Keigo Kurusu arrives and tries to stop Uryu. He reveals to Yuki that he is the fourth future diary holder who owns the crime investigation future diary, which gives him details of crimes that will happen within the next 90 days. Still, it cannot predict the future of an investigation by someone other than himself. Unlike Uryu, Keigo apparently has no intention of killing Yuki and instead gives him a chance to defeat Uryu by destroying her cell phone while she is caught off guard by Yuno's sudden attack. Yuki rushed forward and tried to destroy Uryu's cell phone with a dart, but she managed to dodge it even though the dart hurt her eye. Uryu, who has the escape future diary, decides to run away when she realizes that her plans to kill Yuki have failed. After that incident, Keigo offered to cooperate with Yuki and Yuno to stop the deadly game designed by Deus Ex Machina, and the two agreed to work together. The next day, they meet Keigo in his office, where he asks them to work together to uncover the identities of the other future diary holders. Keigo tells them about Uryu, who will likely launch another attack to kill Yuki soon. Therefore, Keigo plans to catch Uryu by using Yuki and Yuno as bait to attract her attention to get out of her hiding place. After that, they go to a playground, but until late at night, Uryu doesn't show her whereabouts. Shortly afterward, they go home. On the way, Yuno invites Yuki to stop by her house, and he accepts. He finds it odd because it's dark in her house, so he has to rely on the flashlight on his cell phone to light the way when he tries to find the toilet in the house. However, his steps stopped when he found a door that looked strange. He ventured to open the door and was shocked when he found 3 decomposed corpses in the room behind the door. He suddenly feels scared and immediately runs away from Yuno's house without her knowledge. However, when he finally arrived at his house, he found Yuno already at his doorstep. Because of that, Yuki tried to call Keigo to tell him about the corpses. But Yuno, who has the Yukiteru diary that can monitor all his activities, can find out that he is trying to call Keigo and then asks why he called the policeman. At the same time, Uryu, who tried to run away from the police who were on patrol, looked very tired because she felt weak due to her severe injuries. After that, she is visited by a mysterious man who offers to save her and takes her to a hut in the woods. The man then reveals himself to be the 12th future diary holder named Yomotsu Hirasaka, who turns out to be blind and relies on a tape recorder to predict the future. His tape recorder, called the Justice Diary, can tell him what evil deeds will happen in the future, which range from normally criminal like plotting murder to the nonsensical like littering. Furthermore, his diary can hypnotize people by confusing them. Upon knowing that Uryu is a future diary holder just like him, Yomotsu drugs and tortures her to get information on other future diary holders. The next morning, Keigo came to Yuki's house because he got information about Uryu, who was said to have been captured by the Omekata cult. Seeing Keigo's arrival, Yuki tries to tell him about the corpses in Yuno's house, but he cannot tell him, fearing Yuno will find out through her diary. Moreover, Yuno was already in Keigo's car because the 3 of them were going to the Omekata cult's quarters. Upon arrival, they were immediately asked to confront the leader of the Omekata cult, a girl named Tsubaki Kasugano, who turned out to be the 6th future diary holder who had poor eyesight, being unable to see more than a few meters. Tsubaki has the clairvoyance diary, which allows her to read what her followers see because she fears traitors from within. Her parents were actually the founders of the Omekata cult and told their followers that she had the power of clairvoyance. However, her life changes drastically when a high-ranking cult member named Funatsu kills her parents by destroying their car with an improvised bomb. Funatsu took over the cult with Tsubaki as a figurehead and decreed that cultists should cleanse themselves of their sins by releasing their lust with Tsubaki. Tsubaki deliberately traps Yuki and his friends because she gets a dead-end message indicating that she will die soon, even though the one who was after her life was actually Yomotsu. Knowing that Yuki has survived an assassination attempt by the other future holders, Tsubaki asks him to accompany her for one night because she is predicted to die soon. In return, Tsubaki will hand over Uryu, who is currently being held in the underground prison at the shrine. Hearing that, Yuno becomes very irritated, especially after Yuki agrees to spend time with Tsubaki to save her from death. However, suddenly a fire broke out in that place, and the situation became even more dangerous when the cultists killed each other, which turned out to be the work of Yomotsu, who was able to hypnotize others with his tape recorder. During the chaos, Yuki tries to save Tsubaki, but Yuno forbids him and asks him to quickly escape from the place. Yuki immediately refuses Yuno's request. He instead called her the crazy girl. On the other hand, Keigo tried to extinguish the fire in that place by activating the automatic fire extinguisher. Meanwhile, Yuno, who thinks that Tsubaki has brainwashed Yuki and is trying to snatch him from her, then tries to kill Tsubaki. But then, a notification appeared on Yuki's cell phone and read dead end, indicating that he would soon die there. Yuno, who already knows that Yomotsu will come to kill Yuki, starts attacking the cultists who try to stop her from saving Yuki, who insists on taking Tsubaki away with him. When they almost reached the shrine's main gate, Tsubaki stopped her steps, then asked Yuki to stay and face Yomotsu together to defeat him. Hearing this, Yuno tries to convince Yuki to go save himself instead of staying and causing him to be killed. In the middle of the debate between the two girls, Yuki gets a call from Keigo, who manages to find Uryu's whereabouts and informs him about Yomotsu, who tried to kill Tsubaki with Uryu's bomb. At the same time, Yomotsu appeared wearing a strange costume with 4 hypnotized cult members dressed like him, then attacked them simultaneously. Upon knowing that Yomotsu is blind, Yuno manages to tell him apart from the others and kill him. Surprisingly, Tsubaki had planned all of this because her true purpose was to kill the future diary holders, including Yuki and Yuno. Because Yuno had killed Yomotsu, Tsubaki ordered her followers to arrest them. Knowing that Yuno loves Yuki, Tsubaki then kisses him right in front of Yuno. She suddenly became furious and slaughtered the cultists who tried to capture her, even being able to cut off Tsubaki's right hand with an axe. Because she feels very tired and thinks that she will not be able to protect Yuki any longer, Yuno then asks him to immediately escape from that place while leaving her cell phone with Yuki so that it can still be useful to protect him. Yuno, who is exhausted, is captured by the cultists, while Yuki tries to escape from the cultists trying to kill him on Tsubaki's orders. Knowing that he wouldn't just leave and still hiding around the place, Tsubaki then announces over the loudspeaker that she will order her followers to violate Yuno if Yuki doesn't come to see her soon. After hearing the announcement, Yuki, hiding somewhere, seemed confused about what he should do. However, after he saw all the diary entries on Yuno's cell phone about him, he immediately realized that she had always loved him and would do anything to protect him, even if she had to sacrifice her own life. Shortly afterward, Yuki rushed to where Tsubaki was and arrived just in time before her followers harassed Yuno. He then throws a ball at the ceiling to distract everyone while he rushes over to Tsubaki and shoots a dart into her future diary, which rips it apart, causing her to die and disappear into a vortex. Yuno was crying and relieved that Yuki had decided to come back to save her. After all that incident, they were finally rescued by Keigo and the police, where he apparently decided to free Uryu. In return, Keigo asked her to provide all the information regarding the future diary holders. A few days later, Yuki is seen at the airport to pick up his mother, Rei Amano, who works overseas as a video game programmer. On the other hand, Yuno, who knows about Rei's arrival through her future diary, rushes to Yuki's house and breaks in by breaking the window. Yuki and his mother, who finally arrived at the house, thought that there had been a theft in their house. However, he soon finds out that the one who caused the window glass to break was none other than Yuno, who barged into his house. Because of that, he tries to hide Yuno's presence at his house because he doesn't want his mother to misunderstand a girl's existence in their house. But in the end, Rei knows about Yuno's whereabouts and, surprisingly, welcomes her to their house. Rei allows Yuno to stay at her house and even prepares a bed for her in Yuki's room. That night, Yuki tries to close his eyes, but Yuno's presence in his room makes his heart beat faster, especially after she said openly that she wanted to make out with him. On the other hand, Yuno intends to kill Yuki's mother if she intends to keep him away from her side. But because Rei welcomed her presence, even matched her with Yuki, she finally gave up on killing Rei. The next day, Rei introduces a 5-year-old boy named Reisuke Hojo, whose parents were killed in the Omekata cult incident. She decides to take care of him for a while. Everyone seemed to be gathered in the living room when Reisuke was seen making something out of paper. He intends to show his crafts to Yuno and runs towards her carrying a pair of scissors. Unexpectedly, Reisuke tripped on the carpet and fell into Yuno's arms, with the tip of the scissors pointing at her chest. Yuki looked very surprised, thinking that the sharp scissors had hit her. However, Yuno, who had anticipated this, was using a pillow so the scissors wouldn't hurt her. Reisuke apologizes to Yuno, then goes to the bathroom, where he takes out his coloring book that can predict the future. Reisuke turns out to be the 5th future diary holder who has the Hypervision Diary, a coloring book that gives a small summary of the activities that he may perform for the day. However, his diary only shows 3 entries for the day: morning, noon, and night. Despite this limit, Reisuke has all 3 entries at the same time, allowing him ample time to carefully plot his next move and be at the right place and time. Although he looks like an innocent boy, he is actually very smart and has a diabolical mind, where he intends to kill Yuki and Yuno, who he knows as the future diary holders, just like him. Reisuke is even desperate to do various ways to kill Yuki and Yuno and tries to hide the kill action as a mere accident. Although he has not realized that Reisuke is the future diary holder who intends to kill him, Yuno already knows everything and tries to protect him. But then, Yuki finally finds out that Reisuke is a future diary holder after he sees a notification that Yuno will die from being electrocuted. Yuki rushes after Yuno to the bathroom and manages to prevent Reisuke from trying to kill her by inserting an electric cable into the bathtub. Because he already knows about Reisuke's identity, Yuno openly says she will kill him. However, he forbids Yuno from hurting Reisuke and suggests that they eliminate Reisuke by destroying his future diary. Finding Reisuke's future diary was not as easy as imagined because he is a clever boy. Feeling irritated, Yuno intends to kill him with a hammer when Yuki is not at home, but she instead accidentally hits Rhea with a hammer, causing her to fall unconscious. She immediately helps Rhea and apologizes to Yuki for hurting his mother. But Yuki doesn't mind it and forgives Yuno, then asks her to focus more on finding Reisuke's future diary. She concentrates her thoughts and finally finds out that Reisuke has sent his future diary to the post office with the aim of Yuki's home address. At the same time, Yuki, who heard that a courier was at his doorstep to deliver a package, rushed to the door and grabbed the package that Reisuke was about to take. Unexpectedly, the package was not Reisuke's future diary, but a poisonous gas that instantly knocked Yuki unconscious. Seeing Yuki lying helpless, Yuno rushed to take him into the toilet to save him because the poisonous gas began to spread throughout the room and the house. Wearing a gas mask, Reisuke then approaches her and tells her that he has an antidote and will give it to Yuno if she is willing to play hide and seek with him. To save Yuki, Yuno immediately accepts Reisuke's offer and starts looking for his whereabouts while covering her mouth and nose so as not to inhale the poison gas. Yuno finally finds where he is waiting for her at the top of the stairs. However, when she climbs the stairs, he wets the stairs and flows electric currents, making her electrocuted and limp. After that, Reisuke approaches Yuno and tries to kill her by injecting cyanide poison. But then, Yuki suddenly appeared and immediately shot a dart at him, causing him to fall. Yuki tries to save Yuno by giving CPR, but he is already too weak from the effects of the poison gas, so he faints instead. Yuno, who doesn't want Yuki's efforts to be in vain, then tries to get up until she finally manages to stab Reisuke and his future diary, which instantly eliminates the boy's existence. She then takes the antidote and tries to inject it into Yuki. However, because Yuno was exhausted, she fainted before she could inject the antidote into Yuki's body. Surprisingly, Uryu arrives at Yuki's house after receiving information from Keigo. Instead of killing Yuki and Yuno, Uryu chooses to save them both. Yuki, who woke up, had time to see the existence of Uryu, who was saving him and Yuno. As Uryu walks away, she says that Yuki must kill Yuno as soon as possible before she becomes his worst enemy. After that incident, Rhea was rushed to the hospital for intensive treatment. Keigo then gave her false information about the robbery incident that occurred at her house, where Reisuke was kidnapped in the incident. Meanwhile, Deus Ex Machina held another meeting the future diary holders attended to announce the diary holders who had died. In the middle of the meeting, the 10th future diary holder, a man named Karudo Tsukishima, begged Deus to transfer ownership of his future diary to someone else, and Deus agreed. 2 weeks later, Yuki and Yuno appear to have transferred to a new school, but they are not classmates. He enters his class and is very surprised to find out that he is in the same class as Oji Kosaka, his former classmate who used to abuse him and also one of the students who gave him to Uryu when she committed her terrorist act at school some time ago. Kosaka then tries to embarrass Yuki in front of their classmates. However, a cheerful girl named Hinata Hino defends him, invites him to be friends with her, and introduces Yuki to her best friend, Mao Nonosaka. Even though Yuki accidentally embarrasses Hinata in front of their classmates, she doesn't hold a grudge against him. When she comes home from school, Yuno is surprised by Yuki, who makes some new friends on his first day at school, which is a rare moment because he is a shy and aloof person. In fact, Yuki became familiar with Hinata and Mao, including Kosaka, who had bullied him. Hinata then invites her friends to visit a place with a beautiful view of the entire city. Even though Yuki looks happy because he has a lot of new friends, Yuno stays away from them because she always gets jealous when Yuki gets along with other people, especially with other girls. While enjoying the view, Hinata suddenly headed into the forest not far from there. At the same time, Yuki received a notification about the attack on Hinata. They rushed to find her and were surprised to find her arm and body in the forest. Before they had time to confirm what really happened to Hinata, a young man named Aru Akise appeared there. He asked them to leave because the herd of stray dogs started chasing them. Akise, Yuki's classmate at his new school, takes them to an observation tower nearby to take shelter from attacks by stray dogs. Arriving there, Yuno suspects Yuki's 4 classmates, one of whom must be the future diary holder who can control the pack of stray dogs. Yuno puts a greater suspicion on Akise, who suddenly appears and brings them to that place. Before Akise could explain anything, a herd of stray dogs seemed to be trying to break in through the doors and windows, so they tried their best to restrain it. Night fell, and the herd of stray dogs finally left the observation tower where they were. Realizing that Yuki was so glued to his cell phone, Mao approached him, and unexpectedly, she immediately pointed a knife at his neck and grabbed his cell phone. Mao handed Yuki's cell phone to Hinata, who was still alive and well. Hinata then reveals to Yuki and his companions that she is the future diary holder. She turned out to be the daughter of Karudo Tsukishima, the 10th future diary holder, who decided to transfer ownership of his future diary to his daughter, Hinata. Tsukishima has the breeder's diary, which allows him to control his dogs to attack his enemies using his cell phone by voice command. However, the disadvantage is that the more dogs the user controls, the greater concentration is needed to command all of them, leaving the user vulnerable. Because Yuki and Yuno did not attend the meeting, they did not know that Tsukishima had transferred ownership of his diary to Hinata, revealing that her true target was Akise. Tsukishima manipulates to kill Akise because he is a future diary holder and suspects Tsukishima as the mastermind behind the recent serial murders. Knowing that he was the assassination target, Akise looked relaxed and challenged Hinata to guess which hand he hid a coin in, with his cell phone as the forfeit. He says that Hinata must free Yuki if she loses the game, which she accepts. Although using Yuki's random diary, which can predict the future of the people around him, Hinata cannot guess correctly, so she finally loses. According to the agreement, Hinata released Yuki but did not return his future diary. Realizing that something is wrong, Yuno attacks Akise, manages to overthrow him, and learns he is not a future diary holder. However, Akise has physical strength that is strong enough to turn things around and can easily overthrow her. Soon afterward, Akise tries to convince Yuno to trust him in the next game, where he gets a turn to guess where Hinata hid the coin. Having no other choice, Yuno entrusts everything to him, who can correctly guess the coin's position, so Akise asks Hinata to return Yuki's cell phone. However, Mao instead tries to break Yuki's phone, so Yuno runs towards her and stabs her. When Yuki and his companions were about to leave, Hinata used her future diary to summon a pack of stray dogs and ordered it to chase them. Still curious about why Hinata did all this, Yuki decides to go back and try to convince her not to kill them because he feels sure she is actually a good girl. While Akise and Kosaka became bait so the stray dogs would not chase Yuki, Yuno ran quickly and preceded him to arrive at Hinata's place first. Arriving there, Yuno threatened Hinata with a knife and prepared to slit her throat. On the other hand, because Yuno managed to corner Hinata, the stray dogs stopped chasing Akise and Kosaka, so they decided to follow Yuki to the observation tower. Meanwhile, Yuki, who sees Yuno about to kill Hinata, immediately rushes to prevent her and tries to convince her that Hinata is actually a good person. Unfortunately, Yuno doesn't care whether Hinata is a good person because, according to her, Hinata has the potential to snatch Yuki from her, so she will kill Hinata or anyone who tries to take him from her side. Upon hearing that, Yuki is forced to declare Yuno as his girlfriend so that she frees Hinata. This method works because Yuno, who blushes with embarrassment at his statement, immediately frees Hinata. After that, Tsukishima, who had been monitoring all their movements through a device attached to one of his dogs, spoke to Hinata and the others through the loudspeaker on the device, where he revealed that Hinata's actions were part of his plan. Hinata apologizes to her father for failing to do her job, but her father openly laughs at her naivety. Tsukishima criticizes her naivety but tells her not to become a bad person like him. He informs Yuki to beware of the diary owners who act nice but can also be deceptive, and it is revealed that Keigo is standing behind Tsukishima, having tracked him down using his own diary. He identifies Keigo as one of the nice people he mentioned, and suddenly, he is shot in the back of the head by Keigo, his death heard by Yuki and Hinata. Sometime later, Akise tells Yuki and Yuno about a location where they can pretend to be married, even wearing nice clothes. Hearing this, she gets excited and immediately invites him to go there. They seem to be having a great time at the venue, even though they weren't really having a wedding ceremony. As night falls, Yuki and Yuno finally go home, where Yuki is forced to take her home because she is asleep in his arms. Even though he is afraid because of the decomposed corpses in one of the rooms in her house, Yuki still dares to go there. However, how surprised he was when he saw Akise at her house. Akise reveals that he purposely sent Yuki and Yuno to a location where they can pretend to be married so he can explore her residence, which he finds very suspicious. Akise then showed Yuki a door, which was the door of the room where the bodies were. However, when he opened the door, the room inside turned out to be shattered, and there was a hole. Afterward, Yuki asked Yuno, who had just woken up, about the whereabouts of the decomposed corpses that were previously in the destroyed room. She innocently says that she doesn't know what corpse he is referring to and that this is the first time Yuki has come to her house. Hearing that, he became shocked and surprised at the same time because he had visited her house before. Akise theorizes that Yuno's mental balance is so fragile that she modified her memories as a defense mechanism. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Keigo deliberately makes Yuki and Yuno suspects in the murder case of Karudo Tsukishima and orders his men to arrest them. From the start, Keigo had intended to trick Yuki and Yuno into smoothing out his plan to kill the future diary holders and become the god of time and space to replace Deus Ex Machina. He is very ambitious to win the game and become a god to save his son, who suffers from an incurable disease. One of the police detectives named Masumi Nishijima finally managed to catch them and immediately took them to the police station for interrogation, where they just found out that they were named as suspects in the murder of Karudo Tsukishima. Keigo, who had previously watched Yuki and Yuno and more or less knew their nature, took Yuki to the interrogation room alone, where he planned to provoke Yuno to take frontal action by threatening his safety. In the interrogation room, Keigo forces him to play a rigged game of Russian roulette with his service revolver. Through a notification from her future diary, Yuno finds out that Yuki is in a dangerous situation because he is being threatened by Keigo. Yuno, who can't contain her anger, overthrows the policemen guarding there while stealing their weapons before finally breaking into the interrogation room just before Keigo shoots Yuki. Without thinking, she immediately shot Keigo several times, wounding him very fatally, and rushed to bring Yuki to escape from that place. Even though he was badly injured, Keigo seemed happy because everything went according to his plan. After all, he planned for Yuno to commit these crimes so that her actions could be detected by his future diary. Keigo didn't even think that Yuki would become a criminal after accidentally shooting one of the policemen who were chasing him, so now he can monitor Yuki's movements through his future diary. Yuki and Yuno, who tried to escape to the roof of the building, then became desperate and desperately jumped from the roof of the building. However, their lives were saved by a truck that happened to be there, so they could land safely on the truck's tarpaulin. Since they managed to escape, the police then made them fugitives and immediately carried out a massive search to find their whereabouts. Afterward, Yuki and Yuno, walking down the hospital corridor after treating their injuries, were surprised by the appearance of Uryu, who immediately blew up the building and took Yuki hostage. Due to an unintentional incident, Yuki accidentally activates the bomb that Uryu had planted and causes them to be trapped between two collapsed floors. Uryu is forced to cooperate with Yuno, who offers to help her if she is willing to free Yuki. Elsewhere, due to the explosion caused by Uryu, Keigo finally finds the whereabouts of Yuki and Yuno and rushes to the hospital. With their deaths foretold in all three diaries, Uryu decides to ally with them and takes them to the room where Keigo's dying son and wife are. She also revealed that he had teamed up with Keigo to frame the two of them. However, after receiving the dead-end message, she decides to work with them so that they can escape from Keigo and the police who have surrounded the place. With the police surrounding the hospital, Uryu takes Keigo's son and wife hostage and tries to bargain with Keigo, while Yuki is asked to stand guard outside the room to monitor the situation. She then gives a grenade to Yuki for self-defense if the situation is not in their favor. After that, she contacted Keigo and tried to make a deal with him. Surprisingly, Keigo apparently refused to negotiate, saying that his son would die sooner or later, so he decided to win the game. Because Uryu failed to negotiate with him, Yuki became pressured by the police who had entered the place and could easily overthrow him. Not long after, Keigo arrived and rushed to Yuki to kill him. But at the same time, Yuno appears there after getting a notification about Yuki being in danger. She immediately shoots at the police and engages in a shootout with Keigo. Keigo then realizes that Yuno has great shooting ability, indicating that she is not an amateur. When Yuno runs out of bullets, Keigo uses the opportunity to take Yuki hostage. However, she didn't give up and rushed to get Uryu's grenade given to Yuki and immediately approached Keigo, saying that the three of them would die together if he didn't free Yuki. During the tense situation, Keigo finally freed Yuki and told him to get out of there. However, Yuno realized it was all Keigo's ploy, so she pulled the grenade lever and ran toward it. Meanwhile, Uryu, who had set a time bomb, tries to escape through the window. However, Nishijima caught the action and overthrew Uryu. At the same time, there was an explosion sound accompanied by the appearance of a very blinding light, which turned out to be from a grenade detonated by Yuno, which turned out to be just a flashbang that was not life-threatening and indicated that they had survived the explosion. Even so, the three could not avoid the time bomb that had been activated by Uryu, which then destroyed the building. Seeing Yuki lying helpless, Keigo approaches him and beats him so hard that he falls down and finds Keigo's gun under the wall's rubble. Yuki immediately grabbed the gun and pointed it at Keigo. However, Keigo uses the defenseless Yuno as a shield, so Yuki becomes indecisive and afraid that the shot will hurt her, because according to his future diary, the shot will miss and hit Yuno. Meanwhile, in her future diary, she gets a dead-end message indicating that she will die. However, Yuno convinces Yuki to shoot even though it will miss and asks him not to worry about her because she is ready to die to protect him. Yuki, who heard her words, then decided to keep shooting and express his love for Yuno until finally, he managed to shoot Keigo without hurting Yuno. After that, Nishijima and Uryu arrive there, where she reveals Keigo's crimes of cooperating with a terrorist, none other than her. Nishijima also sets Keigo as the perpetrator of all his crimes, freeing Yuki and Yuno from the murder case against Kaoru Tsukishima because Keigo has been proven to be the perpetrator of the murder. Keigo now has a nullified diary, as he is now the criminal. After learning his family has been rescued, he asks Uryu to take care of his son, apologizes to Yuki, and breaks his own diary, removing himself from existence. After that incident, all cases handled by Keigo were then taken over by Nishijima, who managed to provide a reasonable explanation to everyone, without even mentioning the involvement of Yuki and Yuno, who have now been released, while Uryu managed to escape as usual with her future diary. A few days after, Yuki and Yuno were seen taking a train to where they were going on vacation and stargazing. But before reaching the destination, she said she wanted to show Yuki a beautiful place, so he complied with her wish to go to a remote area. But when he got there, Yuno drugged Yuki and kept him locked up somewhere. Meanwhile, Akise, who had previously suspected Yuno, then meets Nishijima, who at that time knew about the future diary from the notebook left by Keigo. Akise then raises his suspicions about Yuno and asks Nishijima to help protect Yuki. Knowing that the surviving future diary holders were still targeting Yuki for their assassination, Nishijima decides to help Akise protect Yuki. After that, he persuaded Kosaka, Hinata, and Mao to take a vacation together to a place where Nishijima had prepared free tickets. Since they didn't need to spend money on travel expenses and lodging during their vacation, Kosaka and the others finally agreed to go with Akise. But when they arrived at the place they were going on vacation, Akise brought his classmates to meet Nishijima, who was waiting for them. Akise and Nishijima revealed their plan to save Yuki, whose whereabouts are currently unknown. Akise says that they managed to track down the last whereabouts of Yuki and Yuno, who headed to a remote area where there are many abandoned and uninhabited buildings, so they will split up and start a search in that place. In the middle of the search, Hinata suddenly received a message from Yuki stating the location where he was currently. Hinata immediately rushed to the place and told Mao to tell Akise and Kosaka. Upon learning that, Akise assumed that the message was a trap Yuno had set up. Akise and his classmates still head to the location to save Yuki and Hinata. Arriving at the place mentioned by Hinata, Akise, who was full of vigilance, asked Kosaka and Mao to be careful and always be vigilant. When Akise opened the room door, he found Yuki sitting on a chair and lowered his head so his face could not be seen. Akise tried to call Yuki, but there was no answer. He realized from the start that all of this was a trap, but he still ventured to enter the room and confirm Yuki's condition. Therefore, he asked Kosaka to guard outside the room and hold the door so they wouldn't all be trapped there. Soon afterward, Akise and Mao entered the room and found that the one sitting on the chair was not Yuki but a doll dressed like him. Upon knowing that, the curious Kosaka went inside, and the door closed by itself, causing them to be locked in the room. Not long after, several gas cylinders suddenly sprayed poisonous gas that would spread throughout the room. On the other hand, Yuno seems to be monitoring Akise and his companions, who have fallen into her trap through the CCTV camera. In the room where she was, Hinata and Yuki were seen who had been held captive by Yuno, and he looked dazed and worried because he was constantly drugged by her. Yuno, blinded by her love for Yuki, deliberately keeps him captive so they can continue to be together and not be separated. Even she intends to kill anyone who gets in the way of her staying with Yuki, including Akise and his classmates. On the other hand, Akise, who found a CCTV camera, realized that Yuno was monitoring them from somewhere else. He tries negotiating with her to free them from the place while mentioning the 3 bodies hidden in her house. It turns out that Akise has investigated and found that the 2 bodies in Yuno's house are her parents, while the other has not been identified. He threatens her that he will tell all these facts to Yuki if she doesn't release them. However, Yuno doesn't seem to care about the threat because she intends to kill Akise and his classmates in that place, and if they die, then information about the 3 corpses will not be known to Yuki. Not long after, Kosaka, starting to panic and frustrated about the death that might soon come to him, suddenly got a notification about his future on his cell phone. In fact, the notification mentions how Kosaka escaped from the room and headed to Yuno's room to retrieve the key and free his friends. Realizing that the notification was the future diary, Akise immediately ordered him to do everything exactly as stated in the notification message so that they could escape from that place. Kosaka obeyed Akise's words and finally made it to Yuno, where he also found Hinata and Yuki. Yuno, who saw his arrival, wasn't surprised at all, as if she had anticipated it. However, what surprises Kosaka is that she doesn't recognize him, which indicates that she doesn't know Hinata and the others either. Yuno turns out to be holding two keys, one of which is the key to the panel door where Akise and Mao are locked up, while the other is the key to the chain that binds Yuki. She threw the chain lock on the floor while the panel door lock was thrown in the air to distract Kosaka. Kosaka hurriedly grabbed the panel door key, opened the door to the room where Akise and Mao were locked up, and freed them. But, at the same time, Yuno took a crossbow and immediately shot an arrow to injure Kosaka's leg. On the other hand, Yuki, who finally woke up from the drug, managed to free himself with the help of Hinata, who secretly took the chain key lying on the floor. He is very angry when he finds out what Yuno has done to himself and his classmates and slaps her in the face. He untied Hinata and took Kosaka away from that place, leaving Yuno very frustrated because he decided to abandon her there. After that, they went home accompanied by Nishijima. On the way, Yuki wonders about Kosaka getting the future diary and assumes that Deus might have intentionally added participants to the deadly game. A few days later, Yuki, who had returned home, received a message from Deus about the 8th future diary holder, who can host and send predictions to the blogs of his apprentices via a server. The information also explained Kosaka, who suddenly got the future diary. The next day at school, Yuki explains the abilities possessed by the 8th future diary holder and asks Kosaka to hand over his cell phone. Yuki then destroys Kosaka's cell phone, and it turns out it is fine, indicating that the future diary on his cell phone is not real. Furthermore, Yuki assumed that the future diary owned by the 8th was a server that could send the future diary to whoever he wanted. However, because he was worried that Kosaka's cell phone could be used to track their whereabouts, he was forced to destroy it. Not long after, Yuki received a notification in his future diary informing him that there would be an attack on him within the next 3 days. Akise and his classmates, who knew about it, told him they were willing to help him. Akise then devises a plan with Nishijima. They will take Yuki to Kosaka's mansion to protect him and fight the temporary owners of the future diary holders, who will attack him. Akise's plan is to lure the apprentices in, then deactivate the area's cell phone tower near Kosaka's mansion and sever their connection to the 8th future diary holder server. However, when Yuki was about to activate the remote control to cut off the signal, someone suddenly turned off the power, so the remote control didn't work. Yuki and his classmates thought the future diary holders had figured out their plan, but it turns out that the one who turns off the power is Yuno, who appears there to protect Yuki. Akise, who doesn't want his plan to be in vain, immediately orders Yuno to join them and protect Yuki. Because Yuno has disconnected the power cord, Akise and Kosaka are forced to go to the cell phone tower to manually disconnect the signal, and Yuki is forced to tie Yuno's hands. Not long after, the two temporary owners of the future diary, a man named Marco Ikusaba and his girlfriend Ai Mikami, managed to break into Kosaka's mansion and corner Yuki and his friends, until finally, he was forced to untie Yuno's hands so that she could fight against the lovers. On the other hand, Akise and Kosaka managed to disconnect the signal manually, so Marco and Ai couldn't use the future diary they got from the 8th. But surprisingly, they turn out to be the 7th future diary holders with the exchange diaries, which report each other's future. Suddenly, Yuno was involved in a fierce battle against a pair of lovers who had great fighting skills. Ai, skilled at using knives in battle, seems overwhelmed by Yuno, who is increasingly eager to defeat them after Yuki praises her. When Marco and Ai became desperate, they decided to leave the place. Yuki thought that the lovers had given up, but in reality, they wanted to carry out their next plan to burn the place down. Being caught in a fire, Yuno and Yuki instantly become weak, and the lovers take advantage of this to overthrow the two and steal their cell phones. After the assault incident, they were rushed to the hospital for intensive care. Even when Marco and Ai don't kill them, Yuki still feels very worried because the lovers now hold their cell phones and Yuno's, where they can destroy them to eliminate them. However, Yuki thinks the lovers might be planning something with his and Yuno's cell phones because they haven't destroyed them so far. Turned out that Marco and Ai have a sad past, and it's not as beautiful as the moments of intimacy they always show others. They were children who were abandoned by their respective parents. Because of that, they understand and protect each other while in the same orphanage. Because they lived a miserable life, they even tried to end their lives because they couldn't stand all the suffering they were going through. However, they decide to survive and face it together until they finally get the future diary that can predict the future for both of them. Switching back to Yuki, who is being treated at the hospital, he is surprised by the appearance of Uryu disguised as a nurse to get information about the 7th future holders. In addition, she apparently intends to train him to improve his physical abilities so that at least he can protect himself and not depend on Yuno. But then, Yuki's father, Kuro Amano, came to visit Yuki. He seems surprised by his father's arrival because Kuro never came to visit Yuki after his divorce from Rhea, and he thought that Kuro had abandoned him and his mother. However, Yuki didn't suspect anything when his long-lost father suddenly returned and was very kind to him. He seemed to enjoy his moment of togetherness with his father, whom he missed so much. While training physically by running a marathon with his father, Yuki finally discovered that his parents were forced to divorce because his father was in debt and did not want to burden his family. Knowing this, Yuki became very touched because his father was willing to sacrifice for his family. On the other hand, Kuro, who decided to go home first, actually sneaked into Yuki's treatment room to search his belongings. He was looking for Yuki's cell phone on orders from someone who promised to pay off all his debts if he managed to damage Yuki's cell phone. Yuno, who suspected Kuro from the start, secretly observes him from a distance and finally finds out that he has evil intentions to destroy Yuki, who is none other than his own son. Even she also knew that the person who had told Kuro to destroy Yuki's cell phone was none other than the 11th future diary holder. Because of that, Yuno tried to kill Kuro in various ways but was immediately blocked by Yuki. So she revealed Kuro's conversation with the 11th, where he would be given some money to pay off his debt if he managed to damage Yuki's cell phone. Not long after, Yuno gets a call from Marco, who informs her that he has learned about the 9th and the 11th future diary holders through Yuki's cell phone, which can predict all the movements of Yuki and the people around him. Marco and I turned out to be using Yuki's future diary to get information about the other future diary holders. Since Kuro is the only person with information about the 11th, Marco orders Yuno to take Yuki and his father to an abandoned commercial tower for an exchange. Arriving there, Marco and I were already waiting for their arrival, wearing wedding clothes. He then put Yuki and Yuno's cell phones on the table and knocked Kuro down while challenging Yuki to have a physical fight with him. Even though he doesn't have the physical strength tough enough to fight Marco, Yuki still moves forward to save his father. In the middle of their fight, Kuro suddenly got up and broke Yuki's cell phone. Seeing that, Yuki immediately felt weak and thought that he would die. But it turns out that the cell phone is not his cell phone but an imitation cell phone that Marco prepared so that Yuki is still alive. Meanwhile, Yuno finally finds out that their cell phones are hidden in a bouquet of flowers held by Ai, so she rushes to attack Ai and manages to get their cell phones back. But Uryu, who had been monitoring Yuki's movements from the start, launched her action by blowing up the building. Yuki, who almost fell from a height because the floor he was standing on collapsed, finally managed to be saved by Yuno, who came just in time to grab his hand. Seeing Marco and Ai trying to escape, Yuno invites Yuki to chase them and make a plan to defeat the lovers. Arriving at the top of the tower, Yuno manages to block Marco and Ai, who is trying to escape by jumping using the parachute they have prepared. Knowing that they can't fight Marco and Ai at once, Yuno devises a plan to separate the two of them. When Marco left Ai to look for Yuki's whereabouts, he suddenly came out of hiding and shot a dart at Ai's cell phone. However, the attack misses, so Yuno slashes Ai's neck. When the bomb explodes again and collapses the ceiling, she intends to escape from there by parachute with Yuki. But Kuro, who had just arrived there, immediately snatched the parachute from Yuno and fled before the building collapsed completely. Meanwhile, outside the building, the police began to arrive to secure the place from the residents who were curious about what really happened. Amid the crowd, Yuki's mother, Rhea, saw Yuki, who knew he was in the building about to collapse. But then, Rhea saw her ex-husband, who jumped using a parachute from the building and landed somewhere. Rhea rushed to Kuro and forced him to tell her what had happened to Yuki. However, he became annoyed that she kept forcing him to surrender himself to the police, so he stabbed her. At the same time, Yuki, Yuno, and Ai managed to survive the explosion, but they were trapped inside the ruins of the building. Marco tries to move the debris that trapped them all to save his beloved girlfriend. He manages to save them, but he and Ai embrace the end of their lives by hugging each other, along with a dead-end message appearing on their cell phones, while Yuki escapes with Yuno using the parachute given by Marco. After landing safely on a playground, Yuki gets news about his mother, who has passed away. He seems devastated by his mother's death and chooses to lock himself in his room and fill the walls of his room with photos of his mother, who he loves so much. He then asks Deus to bring his mother back to life, but Deus reveals that he is dying and his powers have faded, explaining that all of existence will collapse unless a successor is determined soon. But then, Mormor tells Yuki that there is a way to save Rhea, although that way is quite difficult to do. After that, Yuki gets a message on his cell phone telling him about the person who killed his mother, none other than Kuro. At the same time, Kuro comes to Yuki's house injured. Yuki immediately confronts him over his mother's death. However, Kuro said that no evidence could put him in prison for the murder of Rhea. Even so, Yuki is determined to find the evidence and make his father responsible for his actions that killed his beloved mother. Yuki was secretly spying on his father's movements to find the evidence. Seeing Yuki's sincerity in revealing the truth behind his mother's death, Kuro finally admits all his actions and promises to surrender himself to the police after he fulfills his promise to Yuki to take him on a stargazing trip. Hearing that, he finally makes up with his father, and they get ready to go on vacation. Unfortunately, suddenly a security guard approached Kuro and stabbed him to death. Yuki, who witnessed the incident in front of his eyes, became furious, grabbed the knife stuck in his father's chest, and stabbed the security guard. Yuki again remembered Mormore's words about how to save his mother, where Mormore only suggested he win the game and become the god of time and space in place of Deus Ex Machina. She explains that Yuki can do whatever he wants by becoming a god, including resurrecting the dead. That's why, after the death of his parents who were killed, Yuki is determined to kill the future diary holders so that he can become a god and resurrect everyone. Yuno, who arrives there, seems impressed by the drastic change in Yuki and will gladly help him realize his wish, even though it means she also has to die because she is the future diary holder. 5 days later, in the meeting of the surviving future diary holders, Yuki immediately expresses his desire to win the game and reveal the identity of the 11th future diary holder, who is responsible for the death of his parents, where it turns out, the 11th is none other than the mayor of Sakurami City, John Box. In addition, Yuki has also learned that the 8th is Kamado Yoshida, the woman who owns the mother's home orphanage, where Marco and Ai grew up after they were abandoned by their parents. Knowing that he has now declared war on the surviving future diary holders, John plans to form an alliance with Kamado because her future diary can make many people have future diary, which will greatly benefit John. However, Yuki and Yuno already knew about the plan, and the two moved first and finally managed to form an alliance with Kamado. Yuki and Yuno, assisted by Kamado's future diary apprentices, plan to launch an attack on John, who is on a convoy. They managed to slaughter his bodyguards, but John apparently anticipated the attack and then activated the signal jammer in his car, causing Kamado's apprentices to lose signal connection and make it difficult for them to move. During the panic, Yuki and Yuno slaughter Kamado's apprentices because their real goal is to kill the 8th and the 11th at once. However, Kamado managed to escape by riding the 11th's car that came to save her. Not just standing still, they rushed to chase the car until they finally managed to corner John and Kamado. At the same time, Uryu arrives with Akise, who then reveals that one corpse that has not been identified is the real Yuno Gasai, which means that Yuno Gasai, whom he has known all along, is an imposter. Despite knowing the truth about Yuno, he doesn't seem to care and declares his trust in her while hugging her. And due to the dispute between Yuki and Akise, John and Kamado finally manage to escape. Sometime later, John and Kamado work together to defeat Yuki by connecting Kamado's future diary, a server, to Halun. This supercomputer holds user accounts of every city citizen, making them her apprentices, so Yuki and Yuno will not be able to roam freely because all cell phone users in the city have become the future diary holders. Meanwhile, Uryu, who already knows the plan from Nishijima, turns out to be one of John's bodyguards. With Nishijima's help, she managed to infiltrate the location where Halun was and attempted to destroy the supercomputer. However, their movements were discovered by John, who has the future diary, which can predict the future of all future diary holders, both the original and those who got it from Kamado's server. Because of that, Uryu and Nishijima immediately became desperate. Even Nishijima had to die because he sacrificed his life to protect her. At the same time, John's men eventually caught Kosaka, Hinata, and Mao, who were also there to help Uryu and Nishijima. But then, Yuki, who had been monitoring Uryu and Nishijima's movements, finally managed to get there and save Uryu before she was killed by John's men. Knowing that his classmates have been caught, Yuki asks Yuno to free them while he and Uryu will go after John. However, John already knows that Yuki is on his way, then locks himself in a double-door bank vault in Gasai Bank, which can only be unlocked via retina scan by himself, Yuno's parents, or the real Yuno. Since Yuki can no longer eliminate Box, Uryu starts hunting him down, reminiscing how she lost her parents in the Middle East as a child and grew up under the constant threat of death. In a tense showdown, Uryu gains a clear shot at Yuki but sees her child self standing beside him, letting him shoot her in the torso. Uryu then destroys her diary voluntarily to detonate a bomb triggered by her death, intending to destroy the vault for Yuki, yet the vault withstands the blast. At the same time, Yuno frees Hinata, Mao, and Kosaka and goes to kill Kamado, but she is stopped by Akise. Not wanting to waste time, Yuno rushes after Yuki, who looks frustrated because he can't open the iron safe to kill the 11th hiding there. However, even though Akise says that Yuno is an imposter, she turns out to be able to open the door of the iron vault via a retina scan, which surprises John and Yuki. After successfully opening the safe, Yuno goes in and immediately kills John. After that incident, Yuki and Yuno are surprised by the appearance of dark vortexes all over the city due to Deus's lifespan decaying. She tells Yuki that Akise prevented her from killing Kamado while inciting Yuki from distrusting his friends. After that, they head to Akise's place to kill Kamado, but they only find Akise trying to reveal the truth about Yuno to Yuki. Before Akise explains anything to Yuki, Yuno immediately attacks Akise and asks him to look for Kamado's whereabouts. Surprisingly, Akise can overthrow her and insists he will tell Yuki the truth about her. However, Yuno harms her own body, then calls Yuki and lies to him by saying that Akise tried to kill her and his classmates, who planned to betray him. Out of rage and fear, Yuki shoots Hinata, Mao, and Kosaka and still believes he can bring them back to life after becoming a god. Akise finally arrives and warns Yuki that Yuno plans on killing him at the very end to win the game. When Yuno arrives, Akise kisses Yuki, enthralling Yuno. Akise and Yuno commence fighting, and Akise manages to smash her cell phone. As Yuno kills Kamado, a dying Akise who knows the first diary he destroyed was real, he suddenly has an epiphany about Yuno. Since he can no longer talk, he writes a message on his cell phone and shows it to Yuki, allowing Yuno to finish him off as Deus begins to collapse. After Kamado's death, the only survivors of the future diary holders are Yuki and Yuno. Later, she reminds him about her diary's prediction that they will become one that day. As the days pass, Yuki eventually admits to himself that his friends are probably telling the truth as he reminisces the events that took place in the city. Since Yuki cannot understand why Yuno would lie to him about the possibility of resurrecting people, he decides to get the truth from her by fulfilling her diary's prediction one day earlier. He does a fun thing to her in her house. He confronts her about why she would lie to him, and she responds by saying she just wanted to console him and asks him to kill her. Hearing that, Yuki refuses and instead suggests that they die together. However, when Yuki talks about the message by Akise, Yuno instead attacks him and openly says that she will kill him to win the game and become Deus' successor. Yuki tried to escape that place, but instead, he met Mormor, who immediately pushed him into a big hole in Yuno's house. Yuki, who gets a vision from Mormor, finally finds out about Yuno's true identity, who turns out to be the winner of the previous game and has become the god of time and space. Yuki is shown himself and Yuno, who were the last participants in the previous survival game, which for convenience will be referred to as the First World. In the First World, Yuki and Yuno agree to end their lives together rather than having to kill each other, but she fakes her death, thinking she could bring him back as a goddess. When she discovered she could not restore souls in real life, Yuno traveled back in time and killed her other self in this second world, taking her place. Distraught at this, Yuki breaks out of the visions and confronts the First World Yuno. As the Cathedral of Causality rises, Yuno expresses her disgust at how this state of affairs prevents her and Yuki from ever surviving together. She states that since Yuki will not kill her, she will kill him and travel back in time again to meet another him. At the same time, Mormor makes Yuki fall off his footing and is about to kill him. But then, Uryu suddenly appears there and instantly saves him. Not only revived by Deus, Uryu turns out to get a little of the god's power to help Yuki because Deus realizes that Mormor is on Yuno's side and wants her to be the winner of the game. With her divine power, Uryu can match the power of Mormor. Feeling pressured by the presence of Uryu, who has the same divine power as herself, Mormor finally brings Yuno to the Third World, where she will kill the Third World Yuno like she did in the previous world. Upon knowing that Yuno intends to kill her past self in this world, Yuki rushes to her house with Uryu. When he finds the Third World Yuno abused and locked in a cage, he calls for an ambulance, despite Uryu's warnings about interfering with the past. At the same time, Yuno and Mormor arrive with the Third World Rhea and Kuro hostage. Uryu and Yuki flee with Third World Yuno in tow while she lectures him that the parents in the Third World are not his. An ambulance arrives at Yuno's house with the Third World Yuno's father, Ushio Gasai. Although he is a much more caring man in this world, ready to act upon confirmation that his wife is abusing Yuno, she has to stab him when he starts getting suspicious of her. After that, Uryu drops off Yuki and the Third World Yuno at the school and makes a phone call to the Third World Keigo, forewarning him about his son's illness. Yuki evades Yuno and Murmur's attacks, trying to convince Yuno to return to the Second World and rule as its goddess. However, Yuno is torn between her feelings for Yuki and the inevitability of the Second World's destruction unless one of them dies. She decides to trap him in an illusionary ideal world where his parents are alive, and she has never existed. Shortly afterward, Uryu returns and fights Mormor, but she is overwhelmed once Yuno releases a seal on Mormor's powers. Meanwhile, in the illusionary world, Yuki soon realizes he has fallen in love with Yuno because she was his life supporter. After Mormor defeats Uryu and Yuki is trapped in his illusionary ideal world, Yuno continues her mission to kill the Third World Yuno. However, when she is about to stab her other self, Ushio and his wife Psych arrive. They immediately save the Third World Yuno, even willing to sacrifice themselves to protect their daughter. At the same time, the Third World Keigo arrives and immediately points a gun at Yuno while Nishijima saves Uryu. Meanwhile, Yuki remembers Yuno and breaks free from the illusionary world while releasing the Second World Murmur, who had been trapped by her First World self, to impersonate her. Faced with Yuki's love and her Third World self's united family, Yuno's resolve to kill them all is lost, and she decides to end her life. A horrified Yuki is declared the winner of the survival game by the Second World Murmur and is spirited away through a vortex. However, Yuki and Uryu's actions have caused a positive domino effect that changed the future of every future diary holder. When John's incomplete diary reads the results in Yuki's diary, he calls off his partnership with Deus, canceling the survival game, so he must find another method to determine his successor. While Keigo lives happily with his wife and son, who is finally cured, Nishijima begins a happy married life with Uryu and has 2 children. Not only Uryu but Ai is also living a happy married life with Marco and is now pregnant with their first child. On the other hand, Reisuke looks very happy in the presence of his parents, who love him very much. Likewise, Tsubaki, Kamato, and the other future diary holders live their lives happily. Even Yuno also finds happiness with her parents, who love her very much, and many friends who care for her, although she feels that she seems to have forgotten something. However, when everyone gets their happiness, Yuki looks frustrated since he became the god of time and space, replacing Deus Ex Machina. As 10,000 years pass in the second world, he still grieves Yuno's death in his now empty universe, refusing to create anything as its god. Mormor tried tirelessly to comfort Yuki, but to no avail, since he just kept staring at the last entry of his cell phone. However, the last entry changes and indicates that Yuno is somehow still alive. 2 years later, Yuno has an uneasy feeling in the third world when she hangs out at the beach with Hinata Hino, Mao Nonosaka, Hoji Kosaka, Aru Akise, and Reisuke Hojo during summer camp. In the Cathedral of Causality, Uryu declines the offer of being the successor to Deus Ex Machina in the third world, while John Boxbacchus repeatedly contacts Deus and suggests new ideas for battle royales, but a disdained Deus sends John back before allowing him to finish his explanations. Afterward, Deus states to Mirene and Mormor that the bond between Yuki and Yuno is strong enough to continue in all 3 separate worlds. Meanwhile, at night before bedtime, Yuno checks her cell phone and feels like she has forgotten something important. After Yuno departs from her friends from summer camp, she returns home later on the evening of July 27th. She hears a voice in her head and is teleported into the Cathedral of Causality at midnight with a desire to meet someone. With help and motivation from Uryu and Akise, Yuno makes it to the central tower and finds the imprisoned First World Mormor, who gives her the memories of the First World Yuno stored in the form of a gem. As Yuno gains the memories of her other self, she is chosen as the goddess of the Third World, creating a pathway to the Second World and finally reuniting with Yuki. She enters at the point where Yuki's future and his cell phone changes. They embrace as they prepare to fulfill their promise of stargazing together. This is the end of this anime. The moral that can be learned from this anime series is that too much of anything is not good and will bring misery to ourselves and those around us. Even though love is a good thing to do, loving people too much will certainly have a bad effect on us because if we become too dependent on them, we will become too possessive of that person.